followed by Comrade Ngabuto Nicholas Mabena, our General Secretary. On my near left is Comrade Philemon Nema, the National Chairperson, Zimbabwe Communist Party. And without wasting time, may I call upon Comrade Mabena to give us his notes.
Thank you so much, Comrade Manes. I thought I was going to stand in some form of a podium, but I will do it sitting. But may I request that we have a minute of silence to remember journalists that have been murdered in Gaza by Israel. Just a minute, if we can stand. Thank you so much. Thank you once again for having us here as the Zimbabwe Communist Party. It is indeed a great pleasure to address all of you in our capital, our beautiful capital city, Harare. Many of you I have seen, we are friends on social media. We interact regularly on social media. We thought it was necessary that today we have this face-to-face discussion so that we can respond to questions that are there. We can clarify our position, who we are as the Zimbabwe Communist Party. As you can see, we are wearing red. We are from our meeting of the Zimbabwe Central Committee under the theme Building a Vanguard of the Working Class and the Peasantry. We chose this theme for our Central Committee meeting with the full knowledge that if we are to complete the liberation of Zimbabwe and dismantle imperialism and the neo-colonial state, we need to build a revolutionary party guided by scientific socialism. So in other words, our struggle is against imperialism. Our struggle is against the neo-colonial state, which we ushered in on the 18th of April, 1980, and the rest of the African continent. When Zimbabwe gained the majority rule in 1980, both the ZAP and the ZANU had received military training from communist parties or socialist countries. The term Marxist-Leninist became associated with the people, as we know them today, the war vets who were carrying AK-47 rifles, running around the bush, fighting for the liberation of our country. With a few honorable exceptions, our political leaders saw political education as an inconvenience to be endured in order to obtain weapons to fight the secular regime. In other words, our political leadership who led the liberation struggle used the political slogans about socialism, but that did not mean that they were socialist. People steeped in the ideology of neoliberalism and monetarism were recruited to guide government. We know of the former Minister of Finance, Bernard Chidzero, who introduced the Economic Structural Adjustment Program. We know another liberal, Eric Bloch, an economist based in Bulawayo, then the late. We now have the current Minister of Finance, Minister Mthuli Ncube, and also in the opposition, the MTC recruited Eddie Cross. In 1991, we abandoned the relatively internalized economy established by the Rhodesians, settlers, and adopted the Economic Structural Adjustment Program. We were told daily that making money makes sense. It was an advert which was running in our TV screens. Indeed, the program was particularly successful. By 2008, all of us in this room, we became trillionaires. Remember those bond notes? We became billionaires, poor billionaires. Our money became worthless. In 1991, our government of black liberators, we call them black liberators for a reason, voluntarily gave up our economic independence and they put us into debt with the imperialistic banking system. As much as we support armed struggle when and where necessary, scientific socialism is principally about how we run our economies and how we transit from capitalist ownership to the ownership of the few. How we transition from a capitalist ownership, which is the ownership of the few, to collective ownership. We always talk of the economy being owned by the people, or we say the economy must be placed in the hands of society as a whole. We communists, it's important to underline this, we communists, we do not talk of politics and economics. We talk of political economy. We are always lied to that ZANU-PF is a revolutionary liberation movement. It is not. It is a reactionary formal liberation movement. In other words, you have a liberation, a progressive liberation movement, and a reactionary liberation movement. And the ZANU was, and still is, a reactionary liberation movement. Because we are saying a truly revolutionary movement, or a revolutionary party, which is pan-African in character, would not have committed a genocide against the African people in parts of Midlands and Matabeleland. A truly revolutionary party would be looking down on citizens whose parents and grandparents had come from surrounding countries. We know what happened in 2000 when maybe some of you in this room have those backgrounds, when people were told that they were no longer Zimbabwean enough, that they needed to renounce citizenship of countries where they were not born from, Malawi, Zambia, Mozambique, and so forth. A true revolutionary party would not be using scarce resources to pay off the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, and also running to compensate former white commercial farmers with the hope of returning to the imperialist fold. The imperialist fold is the Commonwealth. President Emmerson Mnangagwa, when he came to power in 2017, the first thing that they needed to do was to end what they called international isolation, and the only way, to end this international isolation was to apply to join the British Commonwealth. A truly revolutionary party will do what our comrades in the Sahel Alliance, that is in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are doing, rejecting imperialism and rapidly building their economies. On the question of course and democracy, let us place this on record. They are both the reactionary and a progressive military coups. You have seen reactionary coups in countries like Nigeria. We have seen progressive coups, as we are saying, in the Sahel region. Before them, we know of Comrade Thomas Sankara. He led a progressive coup. We know our brother leader, Muammar Gaddafi. He carried out a progressive coup. In the Sahel region, we have witnessed the progressive coups which have been given full support by the majority of their people, and whose leaders have rejected French imperialism. What we see in the Sahel region, it is not about grabbing political power. It is about rejecting French imperialism. As you know, that there are countries in West Africa that is still paying colonial tax to France. Some countries in West and Central Africa cannot decide on their military spending without getting clearance from France, and the comrades in the Sahel region are rejecting that. The Sahel Alliance has demonstrated to all of us, even in Zimbabwe, that indeed we can build an economy outside the control of the imperialist forces. So this notion of saying that we can rebuild our economy through direct foreign investment. It does not work. We have to rebuild our own economy. Of course, as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, we talk of building a national democratic economy before we transit to a socialist economy. Building the economy outside imperialistic influence does not mean that we have to surrender our natural resources to the looting class, who today we popularly call as we can. So I'm not saying these people that will decide to say, no, this one are going to give a vehicle, this one will donate a vehicle, are the ones that should control our economy. No, we are saying the economy must be placed in the hands of the people as a whole. It means that every Zimbabwean must participate, not only in the drafting of the National Economic Plan, but in the running of the economy itself. Where for a national democratic economy before we transit to a socialist economy, building a national democratic economy requires a strong vanguard of the working class and peasants to provide the line of march. When we talk of the vanguard, we are talking of comrades that are schooled in Marxist-Leninist theory, or put differently, comrades that are schooled and who have a clear understanding of scientific socialism. When we engage on social media, as I said that some of you engage on social media, you always dismiss us when we talk of the working class. We always get told that there's no working class in Zimbabwe. But when we talk of the working class as communists, we talk of the working class in its broad sense. Those that are economically involved or economically active. These are people that might be selling in the streets, who are in the informal sector. These are workers, cross-border traders, small-scale farmers. There are some that have stopped looking for work. We have artisanal miners, It is this class that the Zimbabwe Communist Party must lead in resolving the political, economic, and social crisis. The Zimbabwe Communist Party is not a class by itself. It's very important that we are not a class by ourselves as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, but we are an organ of the working class. Meaning that we cannot act alone as a party. Whatever we do, we must do so with the class that we represent. Scientific socialism is about understanding the material conditions of the time and the place and devising strategies to take the people on the next step forward. It is not what ZANU-PF says that they are socialist. In any case, Zimbabwe has never practiced the socialist economy from 1980. We will explain later this point. We resolved in our meeting, which we held today, the Zimbabwe Communist Party Central Committee meeting, that we need to develop cadres who understand scientific socialism as a theory. But we have developed also the art of breaking it down in our communities and combining theory with the practical way. So when you want to be a member of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, firstly we place you in what we call candidate membership. You must undergo induction, study the program of the party, study our constitution, which defines who we are ideologically, study, of course, the Communist Manifesto written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And we always say to our members that a good communist is the one who combines theory and practice effectively, because you cannot be an expert in theory, but you cannot do practical work on the ground. One cannot claim to be a good communist when one cannot work in their community in resolving societal challenges, even minor ones. In other words, we communists, we don't go to communities and say, well, you have no water here, we're going to provide you water. We have problem with the grazing land, we're going to provide you this, whatever. We work with the communities in resolving community problems. We noted the attempt to amend the Zimbabwean Constitution adopted in 2013 to push elections to 2030. As communists, we reject this one. But in rejecting this move, we are not simply defending the bourgeoisie constitution, because the constitution by its very nature, the one that we have, is a bourgeoisie constitution. We are defending the right of the working class and peasantry to elect their public representatives. We want the working class and the peasantry in 2028 to go to elections, elect their representatives. In any case, ultimately, Parliament is a bourgeoisie institution that we must dismantle as we build the dictatorship of the proletariat. Because as communists want to usher in a dictatorship of the proletariat, but there are stages to achieve that. But at this stage where we are, is that we cannot boycott elections. We cannot run away from Parliament. We need to occupy Parliament and use it as a tool to advance, defend, and deepen the struggle of the working class. It is Parliament that passes laws that affect the working class and peasant. In defending the right of the working class and peasant to elect their public representatives, this of course requires that we build a strong Zimbabwe Communist Party that is visible in all our communities. This meeting, which we held earlier on, resolved to build party structures in all the districts of Zimbabwe. He is from Manicaland, he didn't tell you he's from Manicaland, I'm from Matebele in South. So want to be all of. Our structure against the looting class, neo-colonialism and imperialism, is both pan-African and international. We are pan-Africanists, we are internationalists. On our continent, we welcome the fact that a number of countries have either joined the BRICS or are cooperating with the BRICS. This will not somehow bring socialism, because the BRICS is not about socialism, but the BRICS is about providing an alternative against the dominance of the United States, Britain, and their allies. For us to achieve a multipolar way. So we are building BRICS, and we encourage countries to join the BRICS to build an alternative. As we mentioned before, we are particularly encouraged by the establishment of the Sahel Alliance and by the fact that progressive countries in Africa are moving closer to the alliance and the policies it represents. In our region, we had elections in Namibia. A progressive person who's a woman was elected in Namibia, and we salute the people of Namibia for that. A progressive comrade was elected in Botswana, President Duma Boko. We salute the people of Botswana. In our region also, there is Eswatini, a small country, previously known as Swaziland. We are in solidarity with the people of Eswatini, who are fighting against the absolute monarchy, which practices feudal Tingulia system. In Eswatini or Swaziland, you don't register a political party. Political parties are banned. The king decides, or the kings own everything in Swaziland. We are then told by cultural activists in Africa that it is about African culture on what is happening in Eswatini. And we ask, what culture which has impoverished the majority of the people? In particular, we give recognition to the continuing leadership of the People's Struggle in Swaziland, or Eswatini, by the People's United Democratic Movement, DEMO, and the Communist Party of Swaziland. In Kenya, we note the bitter opposition by the people, and in particular the youth, to the oppressive Western puppet, William Ruto. You will recall that when everyone refused to send their police force to Hague, President Ruto did so to help the Americans. We salute our comrades in the Communist Party, Marxist Kenya, for their constructive leading role at this time. We note, of course, that there are some in our continent who call themselves revolutionary, but we've seen them rushing to Morocco, giving solidarity to Morocco. And our stand as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, as internationalists, was saying Morocco must leave Western Sahara if it wants to be friends with the progressive world. We are horrified by the continuing genocide being carried out by the secular state of Israel against the Palestinian people in both Gaza and the West Bank. This continuous daily murder has been aided by the USA, UK, and the other European states. There are, of course, some in our religious organizations who hold the view that the modern state of Israel is the biblical state of Israel. And we are saying no. Our duty is to correct, and we are happy that others are beginning to share this view with us, and that genocide must end. We stand in solidarity with the armed resistance of the Palestinian people. The Zimbabwe Communist Party believes in one secular Palestine from the river to the sea. That's our slogan. We see no possibility of a two-state solution whereby Israel controls a Palestinian Bantu state. We stand with the African National Congress and the alliance partners for the stand they took by taking Israel to the International Court of Justice. When the war broke out in Eastern Europe, we were very clear that it was not what the CIA-sponsored media or controlled media says. There are some, my friends on Facebook, who say when they see us putting President Putin here and the Traoré, they will say President Traoré is a dictator, was not elected. President Putin invaded Ukraine. That's not the case. We said, let's clarify this point so that there is an understanding about the war in Eastern Europe. Because when it broke out, we said it was an imperialist war. It was a war against the NATO. This war started with the Maidan coup of 2014. If you do your research, you will understand that there was a coup in 2014, which the United States of America, which has granted itself the right to police the world, has admitted that it funded that coup to a tune of $5 billion. The democratically elected president, Yanukovych, was forced to leave the country in 2014 in a coup, and the media doesn't speak about these issues. The Crimea and the Donbas republics of Lugansk and Donetsk immediately voted to leave Ukraine. So they are in that eastern part of Ukraine. They are Russian-speaking people. Went to a referendum in 2014. They voted to leave Ukraine. But of course, this is not being reported. So the Donbas republics resisted Ukrainian Nazi militias for 8 years, from 2014 until Russia had to move in and assist. So Russia, when it went there, it went to do two things. One, it was to defend the Russian people in the eastern part of Ukraine. Two, to prevent the expansion of NATO. That's why Russia went there. That cannot be said to be an invasion. We support the ongoing initiatives of trying to end the imperialist war in Eastern Europe, fought on the Ukrainian soil. It's not an invasion. The war is fought on the soil of Ukraine. We stand together with the people of Russia, led by United Russia and the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. The progressive forces in Ukraine, led by the Union of Immigrants and Political Prisoners of Ukraine, and the Communist Party of Ukraine, and indeed, President Vladimir Putin. Thank you so much. That's the end of my statement. Thanks, Deputy Spokesperson.
Thank you.